Why, hello. Hi, Marco. It's so good to see you in this space. How are you diddling?
Hello there. No, all good. I hope I'm able to use this thing first time ever here, so hopefully it works.
You'll do just fine. And we have the beautiful, intelligent, and wonder that is Priscilla. Hello, darling. How are you?
Hello, it's so great to see you all again. And yeah, it's been a while since I've done a space, so I'm excited.
Awesome, awesome. Marco, I am really, really excited to get into this one. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
I
me
think we're
too.
just gonna
Absolutely.
awesome. I think we'll just give it another minute or two. I think we may have Astral dropping in. I know he's been crazy busy, Mr. UFO Twitter Week himself. But yeah, I'm seeing some familiar people in the space. Hey, Ruby. Hey, Brian, Garrett, John. Hi, Harold. So yeah, some familiar people.
Hello,
So yeah,
everyone. Thank you for coming along and listening to The Magician, which I guess it's not your usual speaker.
Marco, I think what's super interesting and one of the reasons why I certainly wanted to have a chat with you um, is our community can sometimes be divided into the nuts and the bolts, the woo, and ultimately it's all connected. So I was super keen and Astral is in the space. Astral, I feel like we've spent the day together, bud. I'll just send you an invite over now. Hey B, it's been a while, sweetie. Hope you're good. Right. Oh my
Right.
goodness. Sorry, my kitten has just decided. Bear with me one moment.
It's always nice when there's cats around.
Absolutely.
I've just got a new little girl.
Oh.
She's beautiful. We've named her Grushi, given everything that happened with David Grush. I thought it'd be quite clever. Unfortunately, she's not responding to Grushi, and
Oh.
she's very Audrey Hepburn and only responding to cat. So I
Oh.
think she's sticking with cat. But cool. So thank you everyone for dropping in. It's UFO Twitter week, and there's been a hell of a lot of spaces the past couple of days, from all covering all aspects, and I think it was just really important to plug in the kind of the occult aspect to the phenomenon. So we have author, the magician. I've reread your recent book, the Aleister Crowley Manual, about 50,000 gazillion times. It travelled to Cyprus and back with me,
Oh wow.
and it actually fell out on the plane.
Oh
And there was a lady behind me that
yeah,
seen the
the
great
cover,
front
right?
cover,
Yeah, exactly.
and then proceeded to eyeball me for 5 hours, making the assumption that I was some kind of Anton LaVey Satanist or something. So I found that quite interesting that the many people still have some bizarre assumptions based on symbology, which
Well,
is
I
majorly
I think it's yeah. I
incorrect.
mean, I think it's due to the fact that the symbology is cryptic by its own nature, and it does take some time to deconstruct it and go beyond what seems evil or seems dangerous. Also, because at the end of the day, that has been the lie that has been shared with with humanity for the last several thousand years. So when you hammer on again and again an idea, eventually the idea sticks. It's
Mm-hmm.
part of the everybody who's an occult seeker, if we want to use that term, is to go beyond illusions and delusions and try to figure out what is the truth, the kernel of truth there. And I don't know. Also, the image of Baphomet is just cool. I think it's just a fantastic image.
Absolutely. And my before I get into fully, get into you and your backgrounds, my little boy actually went, "Mummy, why does that goat man head have boobies?" And he's only 10. And I was like trying to explain to him about duality, and it was completely lost on him. And then I heard him on his PlayStation saying, my mum's really weird. She's got this book with a goat with boobies. So sometimes it can often be lost. But anyway, I digress. So yes, thank you, Marco, for joining us. And of course, Priscilla and Astral. So Marco, for those that don't know who you are, it would be great if you could just introduce yourself, give us a little whistle-stop tour on you and your background, and then we will start to peel back some layers around, the occult, certainly the great beast himself, the work that you do, and how that interlinks and the intersection and play between the occult and, of course, the wider phenomenon. So the floor is yours, my friend. It'd be great to know a little bit about you and your background.
First of all, thank you for inviting me here. It's a pleasure, and also it's great to discover Twitter Spaces. I always knew this platform existed, but I never tried it out. About myself, so I've been interested in magic since I was a little child, and around the early '90s, as in my early teenage years, I just turned 45, so you can imagine I was 12 at the time. I discovered Aleister Crowley, the by a comic book back in Italy, where I'm originally from, and it's been an ongoing. I don't want to say like a love story because I really don't love the man Crowley, even if I wrote a book called The Aleister Crowley Manual. I love the magical philosophy and the magical practice that Crowley distilled, which is named thelema. Thelema is a Greek word that means will and can give you like the idea of what is the main uh, tool of this magical practice, which is will itself, and love, will and love, but they have an interesting interplay. um, Now, the important what I think it's interesting for a lot of those who are listening to this space here is that my interest in magic has always gone hand in hand in my interest in what we'll call the who, or ufology, or the supernatural, you called, the general interest in everything that's occult. And my first book on the subject was an Italian writer, well, an Italian American writer called Peter Colosimo, which wrote a series of books on mysterious Earth and UFOs in the 70s. And I discovered those books in my father's library, and I still have them all these years later. Let's say they didn't age that well, but for a very excitable and impressionable young kid, they were great introductions to this. And of course, then, as time goes by and as my magical practice becomes more serious, I get initiated into various orders and groups and mysterious societies. Pretty much.
I love this bit, by the way. Carry on.
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of them. I mean, I've been initiated into Ordo Temporientis, into the AA, into the Coronzon Club. I am a Gnostic bishop in various ecclesia Gnostica. Some of you might have heard the term wandering bishop. Peter Levenda, which actually wrote the introduction to my book and is a good friend of mine, wrote a lot about the phenomenon of the wandering bishops, and I'm one of them. And so. What's interesting to me is that, like I said, my interest in magic has always been there, but I've always been one of those magicians who never shied away from realizing that magic is not just what you find in the books. It's not just the tools of conjuration, the grimoires, stemming back from the medieval time, or even to ancient times. I'm thinking about the Greek, no, Greek magical papyri. Um, and you believe it or not, as much as you would find that the ufology community is divided in nuts and bolts or phenomenon kind of people, it's in the magical community is pretty much the same, in the sense that you get this very like
Yeah.
the people that really believe, man, if you're a magician, you should only think about magic. You should never mix the planes, or intermingle the streams or something like that, which for me is absolutely nonsense. The reality there is that magic is one of the tools that humanity has at their disposal to make sense of everything that's beyond the realm of the obvious, of the, I would say, of the daytime consciousness. We have I feel like we have a daytime consciousness and a nighttime consciousness, and everything that's hidden and occult. I don't even know for how much longer, given whatever we're living in these days and age, right? With the with the current revelations that are coming from this whistleblower. It's called Grush is his name, right? Is it David Grush? I don't remember. I think it's
I think I pronounce it very English. I keep saying Grush or Grush. So I'm just going to
I don't
go
think
with
anybody's
Grush.
figured it out yet, actually.
Yeah, I tend to alternate until I hear him say his own name, and then Ross says it with the Australian accent. So it's
He
just.
does. Grush.
but like, for me as a magician, this is an incredible, life changing moment, because the reality here is that I believe we are at a crossroads, and a lot of people are finally coming to realization that there does exist this nighttime consciousness, right? And this nighttime consciousness does enable connection with another world that has always been there, though. Like, I feel like we spent certainly all my life, so 45 years, but we're talking about maybe 90 years now, to try and figure out if these UFOs, these other consciousness are real. But magicians always knew they're real, right? Like, I mean, I live in a world where I pretty much every month, kick out my tools and I conjure a demon or an angel or what we would call a
Mm.
fairy. They're
Mm-hmm.
different spirits, and for me, and for those like me, we don't see any problem in realizing that yes, there are different consciousness. Most of the times they're not aggregated around a physical body. So what's very interesting for me is that the allegations that actually we have physical bodies, we have machines. Actually, it's not something that just can come through the spirit realms, but it's something that actually coalesces into the physical realm, and that's absolutely fascinating. But at the same time, I believe that there are those who've been preparing, the mass consciousness for this moment. Again, I'm thinking about my friend
Mm-hmm.
Peter Lavenda. He's been writing what he's been writing in Sinister Forces first, or what he's been writing, especially in Secret Machines, is exactly this, right? It's they're out there. They've
Yeah.
always been out there, and actually, we're getting more and more to the point that we cannot deny their existence anymore. And what's going to be interesting going forward is, will humanity have the tools to make proper contact and make sense of it? I'm also thinking, right, and of course I'm going places. Sorry, I ramble a lot, so let me know if you want to steer back
Hey,
to.
the floor
The
is yours,
best
Marco.
rambles.
Yeah, like me and
Yeah, we
Priscilla were
just
like so signed up.
yeah, I could hear you speak all night, and you kept saying that when you came on the podcast, and I was like, "Ramble on, honey." Like you're so, I just love listening to you speak. You're so knowledgeable. But anyways, continue the ramble, please.
Back to the
Amen.
ramble then. I think what's going to be very important is how we handle this, because I believe, let's say that this whistleblower guy turns out to be a fraud. It could be, it could be a psyop, could be whatever, right? I don't know. I really don't know. I need more evidence, more data to form a proper opinion on what's ever happening right now. But I believe that possibly in my lifetime, let's say another 45 years to say that I make it to very old age, well, I guess we will get to an absolute evidence of that we are not alone in the universe, and in fact, the others are always been here. How will humanity handle that? How our social, economical, political, and religious feelings will handle that? What will these communications and this intermingling bring? Will it be favorable? Hardly on the side of those who think that we need this connection. This is how we will get to the next level of evolution. And I believe that, at least in my own conjuring of the spirits, I've always had great relationships with the spirits, to the point that I'm talking to you right now from my living room, and I'm surrounded by paintings of demons that my partner does every time we conjure them, and they're my friends. And I go, maybe it's gonna sound completely nuts to some of you, but this is the lived experience of somebody who is, a modern day magician. And I believe that a lot of you will have to become modern day magicians, because whenever
Mm-hmm.
the proof is out there. We're well beyond the Fox Mulder here, right? We're well beyond X File. It's not about we want to believe; it's there, and I'll tell you something else as well, is that if you don't want to wait for the governments to give you, the green light to go, yes, everything is true, you can actually now speak with aliens or with others. You know what, you can start learning magic and do it, maybe not tomorrow, but let's say in 1 year's time. You need a little bit to build up some tools
Yeah.
first, but then you can do it. Like, so yeah, long story
That's what's
short,
so
this is
interesting,
this is
Mark.
what I do every day, pretty much.
I love it. I love it. And it's it's not something I've talked on massively publicly, that's for sure. But I was brought up in a very strong occult household. My mum was practicing. I was introduced to members of the OTO as a young girl, and mum was part of many mystery schools, and I was just brought up in that environment. So I didn't necessarily connect my experiences with the others or them or ETs or whatever you choose to call them, and the occult kind of lifestyle I was born into, because it was I didn't know any different. And it was only when I got into my teenage years that I started to realize, oh, not every family does these things once a month. Not My mum very much was. She was, she adored Sybil Leek. She was very much Gerald Gardner. She was very much on the Wiccan side of things, but other family members were a little bit deeper into kind of other areas, and that's how I discovered Crowley. I actually remember my mother finding. A friend of my mother's finding one of his, I think it was Diary of a Drug Fiend, in my library in my
Oh wow.
bedroom, and she bopped it round the corner of my head and was like, "What are you doing? You're 13 years old. This is crazy." But for me, the kind of the putting together of the occult and the phenomenon, I'd separated them because I didn't understand that everything was connected. And I think now, as we're starting to move forward, and the nuts and bolts kind of our community are starting to maybe, and shoot me if I'm wrong, are starting to accept the consciousness side of things. I don't think it's a hard stretch to understand the connectivity of everything. So I'd just like to sort of switch gears just a little bit. So when you kind of started on your path, what was the beginning of your journey? What made you kind of go, okay, I'm going to be a magician. I am going to work with the elements. I am going to study the unseen. I am going to interact with, things that perhaps is not an everyday thing for most people. How did that journey start for you as a human being?
Well, you know what? I think it was due to the fact that I grew up in a very big household with a very big library and not many real life friends. Right? I was a bit of a recluse growing up. That would change drastically in my 20s because I became a touring musician and I went away with the circus for 15 years. But
Sorry, that's just a bomb you've dropped. You ran off to join the circus, Marco. That's
well, it wasn't
fantastic.
a real circus, but was the touring musician business, which is kind of a circus in many ways.
Kind
Yeah,
of.
and but like in my teenage years, I was pretty much always alone in this big house, and I wanted to reach out to something else. I always had this feeling that was something else there. Um, Another big moment happened exactly the same summer of 1990, and that was when my uncle died out of sudden, and that was like the favorite brother of my mom. And I always knew that my mom in the 70s, did seances and things like that because it was something that was hushed around in the house but never spoke out freely, right? And I remember that I was bugging her, right? It's like, hey, can you show me something? And she was like, no, 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 this is not for you. You're too young. You're too young. But that summer, she finally said yes, possibly because she was grieving and she needed to reach out to her own brother. And, imagine like I'm 12, right? I already been reading some books, and I'm very impressionable, right? In hindsight, I have no children, but maybe I wouldn't do that to my children at 12. I would wait them till they're 18. But point being is that we did a seance, and then something happened, something very. I mean, the little table was levitating. That's what happened, right? So I'm thinking, okay, this is real. There's something real here,
Wow.
and I should go and go deeper into that. I need to know. I need to how to do this. I need to learn this, and unfortunately, I was never able to replicate that. I guess that's something that's only tied to the ability of certain people, which I don't have. But I decided to that I would become a magician, and also it was kind of a perfect storm because on one side, living in Rome in the 90s, there's no internet. I was already speaking and reading in English, but not, I mean, I wasn't great. And so, I was limited to everything I could find in Italian, and it was very little. And also very difficult, hard to come by, right? So I tried to make the best with what I had for 5 years because I then would only meet new people that were interested in the same ideas when I turned 18 and I started, going out and being less of an awkward teenager, I suppose. But those 5 years was absolutely formative because I was pretty much spending all my time uh, reading and practicing, and in many ways. One of the big problems in what that I see in nowadays that I teach courses and I have students. I have been teaching to students for many years now, is that of course all the discourse around magic is so much more open and it's so much more available, right? But it's also true that a lot of people kind of need evidence and kind of need proof that they're not wasting their time, and I completely understand,
Sure.
right? I mean, obviously, right? Like, why would you invest years and maybe and maybe even money in the sense of buying books, buying tools, etc., if it's just a fool's pursuit? I didn't have any of that. I just knew that I saw something that was incredible. I always felt there was something else out there, and I was like, okay, that's what I'm gonna do. I have nothing else to do. I have nothing better to do. So that's how I spent my teenage years. I would say that
I love
like
it.
another big moment happened. Of course, when I turned 18, I was finally able to go out and meet with other people, and I was kind of lucky because there was a series of events that led me to befriend one person. I'm not going to name the name because the guy's still alive. He's very old and he's always been very, very private in what he does. And he was, a member of the AA back in Rome. Very rare, but like perfect storm, right?
Wow.
And so he started teaching me, and then I reached out to the OTO. I didn't like the people at the time, and so it would take many more years before I would join the OTO and then leave it again because I didn't like the people again. And I wrote about that at length. If anybody's curious, on my Twitter bio, there's all the links.
Yeah.
And
It's interesting just to cut across there,
yeah,
Marco, because you're probably like maybe the fifth or sixth person I've spoken to well, in the UK. There seems to be this hokey cokey in and out with the OTO. They seem to, in my experience, people get involved, people step away, people get involved again. And it's interesting that you had that experience too.
uh,
Very
well, yeah.
interesting.
I mean, we can discuss a little bit if that's the case. First of all, for those of you who might not know what we're talking about, OTO stands for
Yes,
right.
sorry. I'm kind of thinking I'm just having this private conversation. Yes, if you could break down for our listeners and our
Of
audience
course.
what the OTO is and what it stands for and where that came about, that'd be great.
So OTO stands for Ordo Templi Orientis, which is Latin for Order of the Temple of the East, and it is one of the two magical and mystical orders that Aleister Crowley, um, in the case of the OTO, he inherited it and he used it to promulgate and develop the magic of Telema. Okay, this magical philosophy that he founded and that I practice. The OTO is possibly the most famous of them all because over the years, it just like I guess he has the best branding, and so people could immediately recognize the lamen or logo, and several famous people were said to be members of. The most famous, I guess, is Jimmy Page, which I can tell you was never a member. I know.
Oh, da,
But he's
da.
definitely he's definitely a Telemite. But it was never a member because he was a smart person. and then
Mhm.
and then also think a lot of people think of the OTO as a magical school. It's not exactly correct. The magical school, so an order where you enter, you get initiated and learn magic, would be the other one called the AA or Argentum Astrum, the Silver Star in Latin. The OTO is more something like Thelemic Freemasonry. So the system is pseudo Masonic. You meet in a lodge, which usually is a community center or the basement of someone. And yeah, exactly.
I've been in a couple of basements for
Yeah,
sure.
exactly.
Yes, I get that one.
And then it's a much more passive experience in the sense that you go through these degrees and things are done to you, nothing sexual, unfortunately. Despite all the
Spoken like a true Italiano there, Marco.
but the point is, yeah, I mean, like that's what the OTO is. To this day, it is the biggest Thelemic organization in the world, and by that I mean it has around 2,500 members worldwide, which is nothing, obviously. And most of them, at the they get initiated and never come back for the second time, sadly. And like if you're asking me why there's this thing, people join and people leave, people join and people leave, I'll tell you, I was the treasurer of Ameth Lodge here in London. So I was one of the people of the admin group, if you want. The reality there is that the people at the top are absolutely incompetent. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know how to run a group. Uh, it's possibly a job they never wanted, but they also don't want to relinquish it. And this is the reality in the UK. The reality worldwide is a little bit worse because the worldwide organization, sorry, the worldwide leadership. So imagine like it's inner groups into inner groups, right? Like friends of friends. It's nepotism, like it's cronyism, 100%. But the worldwide organization has all the problems of the UK leadership, on top of also having ties with the alt-right and various kind of cultish behavior. So so like when this became evident in the last few years, before the pandemic, that was my cue for to say hello, it's my time to go. Bye. But being me, I also wrote a very long and very damning article on Medium that tells you exactly everything you need to know. So if you're curious, you can
Good
go
one.
and read that one.
Can I just say
Absolutely.
that's very brave of you and amazing of you to do, because so many people see something wrong and they just don't talk about it. So extra magician points to you for writing that article. It's very informative and kind of scary, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. The reality there is like a lot of people never say anything. Some because they don't want to get involved because, as you said, it can get hairy. And I did receive death threats, and I did receive all sorts, all the kind of stuff you receive when you leave a cult. And I would like to be honest here and very clear. I'm not saying the OTO as a whole is a cult. In fact, there's many local groups of the OTO, pretty much every local group here in the UK, to be fair,
Sure.
and many local groups across the world that are, they do good job. They were like group of friends.
Yeah.
They're fine, but the leadership is a cult, and the OTO is strictly hierarchical and autocratic. So the leadership decide all the important things, right? And so at some point I was really in a position where either I could put up with it and keep doing my career in the OTO, or say at the end of the day, no. I have my ethics, and I think it's more important to just stand for what I think is right, and so that's why I left.
Absolutely. And I reiterate what Priscilla just said. Shifting gears a little bit, I think, because obviously I'm quite, well, not as versed as yourself, but I'm quite versed in a lot of the wording that we'll be using here. And I do think we've probably got quite a lot of people listening that to delve into the occult might be something relatively new. And I wonder if you could just break down what is magic with a K.
Oh, that's a simple question, Holly. Thank you very much.
If we could break it down into palatable, explain it to a 5-year-old, perhaps. If you could just give us
I'll try.
as much as you can in a because I know these things can take decades to learn. But if you had to explain it to my 10-year-old, how would you explain it?
Okay. So magic with the K is a strange mixture of Eastern practices, such as control of the breath, control of the body, control of thought, and Western practices like drawing a circle on the floor and saying strange words so that something answers, something that you will not see with your eyes, but you will see with your inner eyes and hear with inside your head. It's a tool, a series of tools, a series of practices. Again, mixing Eastern influences and Western influences that have the goal to put you in contact with something else. And this, I would say, it's the first, the simple goal. Uh, Famously, Aleister Crowley defined magic in many ways, but I guess the most famous definition is the science and art of causing changes in reality according to will. Now, every time you hear or read something from Crowley, you always should never take things at face value because he was always
Never.
loading the words with a lot of caveats and things you should know before. And in this sense, whenever you find the word will, right, in Telema, and Telema means will, as I said at the beginning, will or pure will or true will, they're all interchangeable. It's a very important concept because it's not so much something that you know from the beginning. It's something that you strive towards discovering. And true will or pure will has been defined in many different ways. One that might be simpler for everybody to understand, but it's not completely correct because these things are not simple. But let's call it purpose. Okay, let's call it like your true calling in life, like why you incarnated right here, right now. Why are you here? Okay, what are you going to do with your incarnation? I will tell you, this is something that I discovered it myself because when I eventually discovered my true will, that's when I went away with the circus. I mean, because you know,
I love that.
I was pretty much like primed to have like I was studying at the time political sciences, and I was going to my mother was working for the government, pretty much in the Italian equivalent of the MI5, and I was primed to that kind of career. And so instead,
Sorry, just scale back. Your mum was involved with MI5, you
I
just
say
said?
that my mom was working for the Italian version of MI5, which was called SISMI at the time. And
Oh.
that's where I would have gone, right? I would have gone in that direction, because again, Italy, nepotism. I'm gonna be very honest with you here. Since I works in Italy, so but then this big moment happened in my life. I did a magical retreat of 6 months, uh, kind of grueling and very intense. And I was 21 at the time. That was the summer of 1999. Well, spring to autumn 1999, where we also had the big sun eclipse, which is like this is a moment I have to use astrologically, and I did. And I came out of that retreat by pretty much I took like a mini sabbatical at university, and then I did that, and then I left political science. I went into religious anthropology, and 2 years later, I got my degree and I became a musician. And this from I'm telling you this because discovering your true will should change your perspective in life, right? You cannot begin with true will. You cannot start already knowing who you are. Maybe some people will have a better understanding, and maybe that is tied to the idea that we do go from reincarnation to reincarnation, and so maybe some people are older souls, right? There's a term that maybe has been became very popular in recent years. But the point is that you never start knowing exactly who you will be, and it's very hard, at least in my experience, that it feels to me that many people kind of sleepwalk through their lives and never find their true purpose. That is the will that Crowley speaks about. Now, why I'm telling you of this? Because we're back to magic, right? If magic is the art, science and art of causing change around you in the world according to your will, well, you must know this will first. You must go through this alchemical transformational phase where you strip away all that you think you know about yourself, and you reconstruct yourself as a new thing. Now, that is the moment where you can cause the change around you. And it's about a science because, again, there's things you have to learn, and things you have to, skills you have to hone, and an art. And that means there's an element of genius, right, coming from somewhere else, from the muse, from God, from the other, right? Because we're talking about that, and you have to carefully and skillfully mix the two and keep those two tendencies in balance in order to truly cause change in the world around you. It's very hard, but it's very rewarding in the end. Now, you asked me to describe it as a to a 10-year-old. I think I completely failed, but I also think that I made sense.
No, you did a great job. You really did do a great job, and it's difficult to break down very very complex arenas and areas because I think from my own experience, there's absolutely zero way I could have explained that without sounding like I was gone a bit bonkers. So you certainly break that down, and hopefully those that are listening, it resonates with them in some fashion. I'd obviously it's UFO Twitter week, and we have to certainly draw into the whole UAP and UFO thing. And something that was always interesting for me as someone who, devoured every Crowley book that he could. And like yourself, back in the 90s, just as the internet was kicking in, the only information we had was books, and only certain bookshops would carry these things. And I recall, friends of my mum, things were like photocopied, and there was not real books. It was tatty, dog-eared, bits of paper that were passed around, like they were holy relics. So it's we're in an informational age now where people can readily find information about Crowley, and we can find information about the others. But I think what I'd really like to understand is Crowley was known as this very scary, magic guy. People phrased him the Great Beast 666, and he had this public persona, which I believe he crafted, by the way. But he had this persona of this evil guy. And actually, I don't believe that to be true. But his connection to the others, I believe, started in Egypt. Could you pass some commentary to that? When did Crowley invoke, or when was his connection? I'm trying to use non-magically ishy words here. That many people identify that as him connecting with our other. Would you like to expand on that for our audience a little
Absolutely. So, first of all, I would like to touch briefly on the idea that Crowley was this evil guy, etc., etc. He definitely loved any kind of attention, right? I mean, he was very much of the Oscar Wilde school that all sorts of publicity is good publicity. I don't understand. I don't agree with that, but it was definitely there. And it also should be said that the kind of people that rant and raved against him is the same Daily Mail that rants and rave against everybody in this day and age. I mean, it was the same kind of rag magazines or tabloid press that we have in this day and age in the UK. You know exactly what I'm talking about, living here as well. But the point is, back to where does Crowley start his connection with the other, right? And I think as you mentioned, it all starts in 1904. So we're coming to 120 years from the moment where he found himself in Egypt, in Cairo, on his honeymoon. He was just married a few months before to Rose Kelly. And they were on their honeymoon. And you got to understand that lots of people don't realize that at this point in his life, Crowley has kind of left magic behind. He was considering himself more of a Buddhist than anything else because he was a very good friend with Alan Bennett, that would become one of the first British people to become a Buddhist monk, and he would be instrumental bringing Buddhists back to the UK. And Crowley was, of course, had his past in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, which was this magical society that became very, very popular in here in London and all over England, and the British Isles actually, at the turn of the century. So between the 1875 to and the Golden Dawn proper closed its door in around 1901 because of a big schism that happened. These groups always end up in schism. It's human nature. Crowley got initiated into the Golden Dawn, was very into magic, but by the time the schism happened, he was like, okay, maybe I'm moving on from magic. I'm just gonna keep on my spiritual practice as being a Buddhist. The others or the gods or whatever you want to call them had other plans because on his honeymoon with Rose, as they were walking around the Bulak Museum, Rose, basically told him that someone was waiting for him, and that someone, when Crowley asked who, Crowley pointed to a funerary stele of a priest called Ankafna Konsu. And on this funerary stele, which is now known as the Stairway of Revealing, you can see three characters: Rahukuit, or the god Horus, the god, well, Hadid. We call it Hadid, but the real name is Bajuti, and the goddess of the night sky, which is the Egyptian calls Nut, and we call Nuit. And Crowley was very, taken aback because Rose didn't know anything about magic, and actually, every time he tried to impress her by invoking the sylphs under the in the royal chamber and in the pyramid of Giza, she didn't. She was there like for the ride, but she was never much into that. But that moment felt like she really was feeling something. So in many ways, one thing that we should knowledge is that Thelema starts with Crowley, but starts with Rose Kelly as well, because she was the one that convinced him to follow this lead. If this was a paranormal show, the investigation would start with Rose, not with Crowley. And that was then the moment where everything changed, because on three successive days, on the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th of April 1904, exactly at noon every day, he was, Rose told him, hearing from the gods, that he would have to prepare a temple room. And at this point, I should also say Crowley is a trust fund kid with a neat 6 million sitting in his bank, inherited from his very rich father. So he was very like, yes, okay, let's rent this beautiful house. Let's get this temple done, and we are invoking every day at noon. We would sit down, and he would then say that a presence would come in the room that he would never see, but he would hear him speaking in a very clear English tongue without any accent from his left hand side, and he would just dictate things to him. And what this intelligence that Crowley would call Ivas dictated to him was what we call the Book of the Law, or Liber Albe Legis. The Book of the Law, it's very intense and very dense little booklet of 220 verses that
My kitten is sitting on mine right now. How interesting is that?
well, cats have cats love Crowley and Thelema for some reason. I've seen it with my cats many times. So, but yeah, I mean, like the Book of the Law is this. I guess you can call it a channel text, more or less, and it's interesting because there are ways where you can figure out if this thing makes sense, or at least there's a logic behind the things you write, and there is. I'm not going to bother you with with gematria, with Kabbalah, with all the tools you can actually use to try and figure out if this is, whatever you receive from the spirits, from the gods, from the others, is complete nonsense or not. And I guess maybe some of you will be familiar with the show Hellier and their use of the secret cipher of the Euphonauts, which is
Yes, that
Kabbalah.
show's just
Yeah,
come. It's just. I think. I don't know if he's in the chat. Yeah, Matt. Matt. Hi, Matt. By the way, I think he mentioned it on a group chat the other day, and I got into it. And I've been absolutely gripped. So yeah, good shout. If anyone's not got into that series, check it out. Sorry, I'll be quiet.
No, absolutely. Hellier was a like a watershed for me, because I was never into paranormal TV, and then one day somebody tells me, "Hey, you got to see this," and this was like December 2019, before the war ended, and so it was like, "Oh, you got to watch this because it's going to be incredible." And there's one guy that you always mention that you know, which is Alan Greenfield. Well, we know each other very well. And
Wow.
like we received Gnostic initiation by Michael Bertio, both of us, so we're kind of like Gnostic brothers, I guess. And so like I really, if you never watched Hellier, and if you're open minded to a different way of doing paranormal TV, I would say the right way of doing paranormal TV, because magic looks like that, not like whatever you see in other paranormal TV. Watch it; it's fantastic. Now, long story short, there are tools you can use to figure out if there is an internal coherence in this received text, and there is in both in the Book of the Law and the other holy books that Crowley would then receive or channel between many years later. Now, between 1906 and 1909, and that's where Crowley would keep going to look for connections with other intelligence. He would use the term preter-human intelligences, because he would recognize that he was talking with something that was immensely more intelligent than a human being. And so, obviously, if you always you can dial into something like that, well, that's a repository of gnosis, of knowledge, and that's where you can get divine insight from. Now, another thing that should be noted is that there's this painting, well, it's a drawing really, that Crowley made much later in late 1910s, 1919, 1918, something like that, which looks like what you would call like a gray alien. Okay, well, he has like very tiny eyes as opposed to the big eyes of the gray alien, but you got like the mandala shaped egg, mandala egg shaped head, and then it's gray. It looks like a gray, right? And now there's a lot of like misconception about what this painting or drawing represents. Crowley would just call him Lam the Way. Like,
Lamb.
he was like, to Crowley, he was like a painting of an ascended master. Okay. Now, what we know from one of Crowley's disciples, Kenneth Grant, which went on to become a very famous magician on his own and write a lot of books, exactly the kind of books that really try to marry the magic with ufology. It's if you're interested in going to the source, Kenneth Grant is your man. He passed in 2011, but I mean his books are still out there. Well, Kenneth Grant famously reported that Crowley considered that as they say like a drawing of the same intelligence that dictated the Book of the Law, Ivas, and he contacted this intelligence by a series of sexo-magical rites. But if you remove the sexual part of the rite, it's not dissimilar to what you would do if you were going on a Stephen Greer retreat to do like a C5 kind of protocol. Okay. And this is what it's interesting because, again, as I said, in the last few years, as I became interested in Hellier, I then became very interested in what ufology is nowadays, right? Because it's kind of something that I completely forgot, having having gone through my life. And then when I discovered Stephen Greer, which, by the way, I don't know if the guy is legit or not, but what I can tell you is that he definitely, I don't want to say stole the ideas from magic, but he definitely, let's say, repurposed magical techniques to get in touch with disembodied intelligences or other kind of
For
intelligence.
sure.
So that was very interesting for me because again, it's like you have one guy that is a very well known UFO guy, right? That is pretty much teaching magic to people, but he never used the term magic, right? But that's it.
Marco, if I may interject, so those that kind of know me on Twitter will know that I certainly am very big into heist, which is kind of a not a different version, but heist, human initiated contact events or experience, was kind of a phrase put together by a wonderful gentleman called Dr. Joseph Birks. And Dr. Joe was part of Greer's original team.
Okay.
They had what can be described as a parting of ways. I think that's the diplomatic way I'm going to go. They had a parting of ways, and Dr. Joe continued his work in a contact modality, and that's something I certainly resonate with. And my entry into this world was through sort of Greer and C5, and I kind of jumped ship a little bit in more of a line to the high side of things. And it's so interesting that your take on the fact that Greer is perhaps repurposing things in a way, because that was my experience. So someone who's been brought up in an occult way and follows a lot of these principles and understandings, that was one of my initial takeaways when, I've had the pleasure I've had something of having a chat with Dr. Greer, and the takeaway for me was the similarities. So I'm so glad that you've been able to frame that, because I thought I was going a bit bonkers.
No.
So I just wanted to add that anecdote.
No, you were absolutely right. For me, like I've never attended any of Greer's seminars. I'm not sure I want to spend all that money, to be fair. But the reality is that whenever I've seen the protocol, whenever I studied, whatever I could find of this, I was like, no, this is magic, right? It's a way of path working. It's a way. I mean, like I can tell you technical terms. It doesn't matter really. It's magic. So if any of you listening, maybe are still resistant to the idea of magic, but you buy into C5, know that you're already doing magic.
Yes, guys. I'm so sorry I think this all the time as somebody that's been, a witch for as long as I can remember in one way or another, that people are so surprised by certain things. And those of us that are already exposed to this sort of thing, we're like, hey, this feels like home, right? So
Yeah.
I'm glad more people are experiencing it, but I'm just so glad, like she said, that I'm not going crazy, that you see that parallel as well.
I wonder if we can get to the next level, and that is get to the Jack Parsons level, where just like
Imagine. Oh my God.
Well, for those of you who don't know who Jack Parsons is, I guess I always have to remember that I should introduce characters. Jack Parsons is possibly the most interesting of them all. This is the guy that brought us on the moon, if you believe we went to the moon, and that in the sense that he created the fuel that propelled the jets that went there. It was a scientist, but it was more of like a savant. It wasn't. He didn't have any sort of true credentials, but still he was in the desert, putting together rockets because he knew that he wanted to go on the moon. Well, he was also an initiate of Lester Crowley's systems, and famously he would invoke the god Pan. Before every time they would go to Arrayo Seco, trying to blow themselves up, being known as the Suicide Squad. I think we need more of that. But then again, if you go to CERN in Switzerland, they do have a massive statue of Shiva before the Hadron
Crazy.
Collider. So,
That's so interesting you've brought that up. And for anyone that wants a bit more of a deep dive on Jack Parsons, I really recommend checking out Kelly Chase's podcast, that UFO Rabbit Hole. She does a great, I don't know which episode it is, and I'll try and link it now. She just has this beautiful way of breaking down complex topics into really palatable way, and she really covers Jack Parsons in a really great way. So I'll link it into the thread. But if anyone really doesn't know who he is or wants to know a little bit more, she is your girl, and she's one of our best podcasters. So check her out.
I definitely need to check this out, because you totally sold it to me. Thank you.
She's fabulous as our Kelly, and she really breaks it down. And what's quite interesting about Jack Parsons is he was hanging out with what's his name, Scientology dude.
Oh yes, absolutely.
So they were all kind of hanging around at an interesting time. But anyway, I digress. Back to you, Marco.
Like you just mentioned Hubbard, I would like to point out the fact that Scientology also is watered down magic. It's magic is really, it's still considered like I don't know, the devil's work. In reality, it's just a series of practices that have been part of human experience since the dawn of time. Okay, it's all about learning how to modify our consciousness so that reality becomes more malleable, in the sense that yes, we can change what we need if we got to that point where we know what we need from life, the true will or pure will. But also, this malleability allows us to kind of pierce the veil of everyday life and reach out for that night side consciousness that's not whatever is not visible to us. And I also believe that you can use this to, well, to call down a UFO if you want to really have this kind of experience. what's really what's really fascinating to me is that so far, I, as a magician, I always worked in the realm of the invisible, in the sense that whenever you call a spirit, you can have what is called like a physical manifestation of a spirit. But I'm going to be very honest with you all. I've never seen a puff of smoke and I know a little imp coming out of the triangle of evocation. I maybe have seen shadow people. I've seen shadows with eyes. I've seen, we use scrying devices. It can be a black mirror, or it can be like a shoe stone, like crystal ball. I've seen shapes forming into that, and I definitely heard voices, and I've heard strange sounds. One way that these beings manifest very often is by way of synchronicity, in the sense that, for instance, like the moment you finish an evocation, a car just arrives right outside your house, and you hear the car arriving. You hear somebody, opening the door, closing the door, and moving towards, your door. But then nobody ever knocks on the door, and then maybe you go out and there's no car out there. Okay, this is what I call physical manifestation, and I guess also maybe to manage your expectations of what it's possible. Now, what I think it's incredible, and again, I was discussing via email with Peter Levenda literally like this morning, is the fact that we are at this stage where maybe the governments will tell us, hey, by the way, we also have machines, we also have like physical evidence of this. Um, I don't think I'm already. I think this will be the moment where, if this is proven, and so beyond any reasonable doubt, and so those who are skeptics will finally sleep well or bad, depending how their worldview is going to be completely shattered or not. Well, what's interesting to me is that at that point we will have to completely dissolve the divide between nuts and bolts and phenomenon. It's all one experience. That's it, and it's always been all one experience. Uh, how we connect with them, how we bring them down, and how we make sure that the communication is positive and not traumatic or negative. That's the big problem for me, right? This is something that I discuss a little bit in what I do in all my offerings, but I also I learned this very well from one of my teachers, which is this Michael Berthiaud I mentioned before. Michael has Michael Berthiaud is an incredible character. Is still alive. He's in his late 80s now. Lives in Chicago, and I would say you should just pick up one of his books, but I'm also going to be very honest. They're going to be mostly impossible to understand. I think I only got a glimpse of what he wrote because I met him and I worked with him and I trained with him. But his books are very dense, um, and they go everywhere from his own version of voodoo mixed with Gnosticism, mixed with Freemasonry, mixed with Theosophy, mixed with ufology, mixed with radionics, and the list goes on. But he's very keen on sending this message, and that is that the reason why a lot of folks tend to have traumatic experiences with UFOs and thinking about abductions. I'm thinking about everything that we know that can go wrong in those experiences. Think about X Files, for instance, right? Fox Mulder's sister being abducted and whatnot. It's because humanity tends to not be ready for it, right? It's almost like you turn and you see something that's impossible for you to understand, and your mind goes bonkers, right? And you could never recover from that. So the idea is that that's what he calls like the bad UFO experience. But in order to bring down the good UFO experience, well, what you have to do is that to learn magic and build up your defenses. And I use the term defenses is a bit strong. It implies that there's going to be an offense, there's going to be an attack. It's not about that. It's more about the fact that the spirit world, the other, it really is something bigger than us, right? It's some, if we want to use the dimensions theory, these beings exist on, and then by beings I mean of the entire spectrum, right? My angels and demons, the fae or the aliens, they exist on a different vibrational level. Like we are stuck into a 4 dimension space, three physical dimensions
For
plus
sure.
time. They're not tethered to that. They're bigger, and so every time they come here, they kind of like force themselves into a meat suit, right? And maybe we see that and we say, "Oh no, that's absolutely horrifying." How and we go mad, right? This is again, this is nothing new. Think of the visions of the prophets in the Bible. Think of the vision of Ezekiel, for instance, right? The famous biblically accurate angels, right? This thing that you see these things that are absolutely crazy and scary, because possibly the prophet Ezekiel was not ready to see them. Uh, magic can make you ready for that. Can train you to be ready for that. So I don't know. I'm rambling. Back to you.
Oh, we're here for it. Astral, you have a question, my love?
Okay, sure.
Hey, I'm wondering, is there a threshold that the phenomenon or non-human intelligence starts to pay attention to you when you start doing things, individual things? Like you could start recording your dreams, but then we've also talked about going out and doing CE5. Is there like a level to which like they really start kind of making their presence known to what you're doing in response?
For This is a fantastic question. So I would say that in my experience, we're talking about a spectrum of non-human intelligences, right? There some will take stock of what you're doing. Some they will completely ignore you unless you really go and knock at their door. Okay, in my experience is that the moment you start working on expanding what we call the body of light, and so really it's C5 kind of level, but also the moment you start, believe it or not, becoming very serious in doing yoga, and that is having a pranayama or control of breath or control of energy practice, well, you start to resonate more with the universe around you. And so beings that can look for this kind of pointers can see that you're doing it. Of course, in the case of, I told you the case of yoga, because yes, that would be like an early stage. And I'm not talking about, the person that goes to the yoga studio once a month and then just do asanas or propositions and see it as a physical exercise. But I'm thinking about those who actually, try to understand how to use the control of breath or control of energy to fully um, bring this energy into their life and into their space, right? That to me, it's already like a threshold where non-human intelligence could look at you. But then again, think about how many people do yoga in this day and age. It became, Crowley considered yoga a secret instruction, right? In his magnum opus, Magic in Theory and Practice, Liber ABA, the first book is yoga, right? And because it was something that was unknown to him at the time, unknown to the West at the time. Now, of course, it's different. What I'm hinting at here is that there are so many people in the world right now that by doing yoga and doing pranayama properly, they are they're beacons. They people, non-human people, non-human intelligences could see them, right? Could pinpoint them. It doesn't happen because um, let's say that it has to be willed. I feel that the way this intelligence react is about intention of wanting to have a conversation with them. Okay, so if you have a body of light, even like as a yoga mom, you will be seen, but 99.9% they will just completely ignore you, just because we tend to think that the universe is dark because we still cannot see much out there, even if we of course we have amazing telescopes right now. But the reality there is that once you start vibrating at those different levels, and I use the term body of light, which is a term that I get from, I guess, theosophy. If you ever seen, again, back to yoga, a map of the Kundalini and the chakras in the body, that's what I'm referring to, more or less. More or less than more, but just to give you an idea. As we build up this body of light, we are going to extend our consciousness into deeper and deeper parts of ourselves. And so the universe is not going to be dark anymore. You will start seeing things. You will possibly start to have a walk through the forest and maybe notice that the forest is not empty. Not because there are animals, but because there's that tree is looking back at you. And that means that there's something in that tree that is seeing that you're there, and you're seeing them as well. It's down to you if you then want to talk to them. Um, and of course, this brings back to the idea that we're constantly living with others. It's just that unless we start looking for them, they will just ignore us most of the times. Is there a question, Priscilla?
Yeah, that's a great point, and this is kind of something that we learn in magic, I suppose, or even if you're doing any sort of intention setting, as the New Age community will call it. But my question is, how do we explain then the experiences that children have sometimes with many different types of entities? Anything from, shadow beings in their room. I mean, they might not say shadow being, but you know what I mean. How do we explain children having these sorts of experiences without properly setting an intention? Are they doing it sort of on accident, would you say, or how do you think this is happening?
I can give you my opinion on that. I don't know. That's the reality of that, right? But if I have to form an operating theory, it's because when we are born, we kind of have our body of light fully formed. It's just that we lose connection with the subtler layers of it. So as we become more and more civilized, as we become more and more socialized, we forget how to see other things, right? Because we kind of become, I don't want to say the term trapped, but we become over fixated on what we call our ego, our personality, uh, the way, our language, right? The fact that we need language to make ourselves understood. We need language to communicate with the world around us. But a language is a tool that works on a very specific, they say, frequency, and it kind of kills everything else around. Like, you have to relearn your other senses. You have to relearn how to see with other organs than your physical eyes, hear with, beyond your physical ears, etc., etc. So this is, again, if this is my operating theory, I don't think we will ever really know, because whenever we speak of magic, magic is a different tool than science, right? And I'm one of those who think that science will never fully able to understand how magic works. And I know this is a big bummer for a lot of us, including me, but the way I've experienced magic all my life makes me understand and makes me believe that science will never be able to fully crack it, right? But that's fine, because we're going to use both of them, right? We're going to use science to to live our world, and in our world, and maybe we're going to use magic to expand outside our world and connect with what exists outside our physical world.
That's how I see parapsychology, is that, in that, parapsychology shows from the data and people testing it over a number of times that the effect is there: telepathy, extrasensory perception. Now, what it doesn't explain is the mechanics that are happening.
Yeah.
And I think that's what magic and these methods of contact and experiencers can help, is like to branch that gap.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you 100%. Crowley famously said that, this was an introduction of one of his first attempt of creating like a practical manual of magic. It's called Liber O. And he says something, I'm not quoting verbatim, but something like, in this book, we're talking of Sephiroth, of planes of existence, of gods, of all things that may or may not exist. And it's irrelevant if they exist. What it's important is that, if you do something else will follow. Like, there is this idea that magic gives you tools to to do things, right? But the reality there is that possibly you'll never truly understand the mechanics behind it. Back to the Book of the Law, Liber Alva Legis, which is this core text of dilemma. One chapter tells us that there are numbers infinite and unknown. There's a factor infinite and unknown, and all numbers are skew wise, which means that no matter how you try to explain whatever you're experiencing, part of the human experience is to accept that there's an element of unknowable in consciousness, in the phenomenon, in everything we do. I'm gonna say something if there's any physicist in the listening, like they would just like roll their eyes, and I agree, I'm with you, but this is kind of like the idea of whatever we understood as quantum mechanics right now. That the fact that the strict physics of a Newton, but even of an Einstein, they're kind of like not working anymore, really, because we physicists know that there is an infinite factor, infinite and unknown, which is the quantum spin, and that is magic. That's where magic lives, right? In that really, really tiny and unpredictable liminal state, but still, it's something that we experience all the time, and we have to tap into that in order to truly connect with the other and truly make sense of this experience. And once, as I said at the beginning of this chat, right, it might be that we don't have much time anymore, because if this whistleblower thing keeps going and it doesn't fall, and lo and behold, by the end of the year we have photos, credible evidence, maybe even shown things, maybe even shown bodies, maybe even shown living beings. When we get there, that's it, and game. Like either we start working with magic, or I don't know, will not be happy as humanity going forward.
It's just an interesting time that we are occupying at the moment, and I find that people are now searching for the more. They are perhaps more open to the possibility of more. And I think this is arose from the fact that we now have access to more information, the fact that we can do things like this, we can speak to experts like yourself, we can debate topics and arenas and mysteries and this, that, and the other. We have a broader way now to uncover the unseen.
Yeah.
And I think that's what the great thing is about the communities that we now form on a global basis through our iPhones and through email and through social media, that topics that were spent decades, hundreds of years hidden away in secrets, secret conversations in basements or, out in the desert, no one's, all very, very hush hush. There is this communal conversations forming about the more, which I think is super important. But I'm going to ask a question now, and I don't know what you can disclose and what you can't disclose. And I am being a cheeky monkey because that's me. And, there's things that I would not disclose publicly, and, given the upbringing I had and the initiations I've gone through with bits and bobs. But given that you have been involved and you are involved with what people would deem is secret societies and secret teachings, could you maybe just, what you can touch on, how you get initiated into these things, what processes are? Because I'm sure there's someone listening to this chat right now going, oh, this is great, this is really interesting, but how do I find it? What do I have to do? How do I get involved? I don't know if you could just put some commentary to that.
I mean, I can tell you something in the sense.
Spill your secret. Spill your secret. I'm only joking. Please don't.
So, I'm gonna tell you something here. Like, there's no secrets anymore, in the sense that
exactly.
We've been the prophecy or the promise of the Aquarian age has been completely fulfilled. Like, there's no secrets anymore, in the sense that if you're curious to know, the secret ceremonies that I underwent as a member of OTO, or even the initiation rituals, of the AA, or I don't know, the initiation ceremony of consecration in the Ecclesia Gnostica. Trust me, I use specific terms here. You can Google these terms, and if you don't get bored immediately, and you know how to use Google a little bit, you'll be able to find everything, in the sense that you'll be able to find all the rituals. Some of them will be commented. From time to time, you will be able to find either like the modes of recognition, the secret handshakes, the secret words, the passwords, all these things. What the reality there is that most people who do that will never make sense of it, because the way these secret societies, these magical orders work, they're all kind of are based on the Freemasonic model of pretty much like loading ceremony with symbology and allegories, and then after the ceremony, uh, explaining them. Okay, so this is what I would call, what I often speak about as formal initiation. Like, you're formally initiated into this order, that order, etc., etc. And it's really about being the recipient of a psychoactive theater. And by that, I don't mean that they feed you psychoactives, unfortunately, but it's more about like you're there and things are done to you, and they're almost invariably strange words, you shown strange images, and then you have some time to think about what went on, and then maybe somebody will come to you and say, hey, this is what happened. This is how you go. You have to this is the legend to understand what happened to you and how to make sense. What are the teachings that have been given to you here, and this is how these orders work, because they have grades or degrees, because you have to go through all of them in order to make the whole pie, right? That's really the term. When you see the term grades, usually it's because you are graded at the end, like you have to pass an examination. When you see the term degree, it's more because there's no examination, but there's just like you're given little slices of this big pie, and then when you get to the top, you have the full pie and you have the full experience, right? Now, there's also what I call true initiation. And true initiation it comes from the spirit realm. I would say that it comes from a very specific kind of spirit, or non-human intelligence, that we call the holy guardian angel, or the holy daimon, or the algoides, or this divine intelligence that really is the sole connector of the entire universe. It is the intelligence behind the entire universe. Um, we all have a holy guardian angel, even if some people would disagree with me. They're wrong. We all have a holy guardian angel, and it's very difficult to get there. It's not an easy task. However, back to what I was saying before, in order to truly unlock your pure will, true will, you have to have this connection. You have to have this connection with the divine. And so, long story short, yes, I could tell you what goes on into these strange rituals, but the reality there, it first of all, it wouldn't make sense at all. You have to have this, how do you say, almost like it's a vocabulary, it's a grammar that you have to have in order to make sense of what I would tell you. And also, that's not where true initiation lies. That's just a formal initiation in this or that group. Um, I know I'm a bit of an heretic to say that, because you know part of why this organization existed is because the people behind it were really selling them, and they did to me as well. They're selling, like we have the secret mysteries of the cosmos, and we're gonna share them with you. The reality there is,
So
yeah, please.
th- there was a reason why I asked you that question. I was doing my typical PR thing. So when I purchased your book, what really struck me is how you've made some of Crowley's teachings and the practices and the ritualistic stuff that typically would be like, oh my God, how on earth do I understand this? How do I wade through it? Your book firstly, it's fantastic. Secondly, well written. Now, after speaking with you, I actually can hear you speaking the words. So you've given me an extra level of dimension to your book. But your book certainly is for people who are really wanting to understand things in a palatable way, in an interesting way, without the sometimes complexity. You break it down in such a great way, and I just really wanted to applaud you for that. And
Thank you.
I'm going to get the link and share it to people. But your book, I believe, is a good starter conversation for people, and it's just so well done, Marco. And I encourage anyone that's into this topic and wants to know more to really look at his book, the Aleister Crowley Manual, because it's not all secrets and whispers in the corner. It's a great start. So
Yeah.
I'm going to link it now.
Well,
Yeah, well done, you.
Thank you very much. And yeah, I mean, like that's what I try to do, because I really believe magic is the birthright of humanity. Uh, it's not going to be like an easy journey. I'm really very keen on saying, especially in my whenever I have students and I speak with them. Um, I always tell. I mean, I had like a chat the other day on this course I'm running, where I told people, like, this is not going to be an easy ride if you decide to pursue it. It is going to be challenging because its initiation is challenging. However, the tools of initiation are not secret. These are the tools of initiation. There you go. This ritual. This is what this ritual does. This is how it means. And in many ways, those were things that once upon a time were considered the secrets, and it was really like a carrot dangling on people, because at the end of the day, organizations thrive on getting people on the hamster wheel and keep running and running and running. I've done it. I've been, yeah, as I said, I've been a member of every organization possible, most of them, not all of them, and then I realized that it's completely pointless. There is no true initiation. There's no that can come from them. There's no secrets of the universe. There are, but you have to find them yourself. They come from what I call this holy guardian angel entity or intelligence. Is there a question there, Astro?
Hey, I linked Marco's website for everybody up in the nest up above. So it's a cool website too. I was checking it out.
Thank you very much.
I wanted to ask about specific locations. So one of the big topics, I think, going around and recently as well, I mean throughout history, but are like hotspots, or even something like the hitchhiker effect, where someone can just go to a location and an entity, positive or negative, could latch on in some fashion. Like, I wanted to get your thoughts on that. Even with occurrences that happen in a specific location, like why?
Well, I mean, I definitely, it's not about belief. I know that there are hotspots for the phenomenon, right? There's hotspots for magic. Why is that? It's because, okay, again, this is an operating theory, right? And I do ascribe to the idea that our planet, by the reality of the universe, is divided in meridians. You can call them ley lines, you can call them lines of power. There's many different words for that. And the idea is that there are moments, there are places where these lines of power, these meridians, these ley lines intersect, and those are places that are more prone to. It's where you could use the term when the veil of the words is thin over there, right? To use a very neo-pagan or Wiccan terminology, but that's true.
I'm here for this. I am here for this.
But that's absolutely true. And I will tell you more. It's not just about place, but time as well. Remember that we as human beings, incarnated beings, we're stuck into time and space, right? And so there are intersections of space and time. So think of a peculiar space and maybe an astrological event. Famously, the wheel of the year, right? The 8 moments across the year, where you have the the 2 equinoxes, the 2 solstices, and the cross quarters in between them. Those are powerful moments in time. So imagine that if you were like a proper magician, like you would use this knowledge to go at the right time in the right place to do specific things, right? And yes, you can begin to categorize this. You will know that there are specific places that are more keen to attract specific spirits. In magical parlance, specific, when we're talking about what we call the demons, or the sublunar and chthonic entities, which can be gods, fairies, elemental spirits, all sorts, right? That then became demons when they've been demonized by religion. Uh, you can call them in specific places. For instance, if you want to speak with celestial entities or angels, and by the way, angels, the term angel really comes from the Greek angelos, and angelos means messenger. So imagine, you can just get an idea maybe what these angels really are. Well, you might not want too much to look at place, but more at time, because you're looking at the sky and at the stars or the space, as opposed of something that lives here. And then there's something that mixes the two together, and that's why you really want to mix, the coordinates being both spatial and temporal. But again, long story short, absolutely, place is a fundamental element of this game. It's where, in recent years there's been a lot of discourse, at least in my circles, about something called psychogeography. And psychogeography really is a term that was coined by the situationist. I'm thinking about Andre Breton. It was just about getting outside in the city and walk without any aim and see where the derive or the walk would bring you. Well, what is really there is the idea of trying to let the spirit of place guide you where you need to be. And if you've never done any of this, I suggest all of you to just, one day, take the day for yourself. So, maybe over the weekend, and then you say, you know what, you just get out of the house and start walking. Try not to look at your phone. Try not to think too much about anything. Just ask yourself with your inner voice, go, like, guide me where I need to go. And believe it or not, I'm pretty sure that you will end up in interesting places. I'm not telling you that something crazy will happen or a spirit will manifest, but I'm pretty sure you will end up in, maybe in a place that you'll find very beautiful or very calming, or the complete opposite, some place that you'll find jarring in some sort. you know, this is because as soon as we decide to shut down the noise of our normal lives, well, something else picks up, another kind of frequency picks up, another kind of messages picks up, and even without, magical tools or magical practices, it's still there. You can still listen to it. Um, let me know if any of you will do it, and then you can reach me on Twitter. And I'm very curious to hear your psychogeographical walks if it gets you anywhere.
I like that. I like that a lot. Marco, are you good for time? Or do
I
you have to shoot? Are you
I
good?
have I have I have another 10 minutes. I think.
Cool. We've got quite a few people in the chat, and I just wonder if you'd be amenable to having some open
Oh,
questions.
absolutely, please.
Awesome. Do we have anyone in the chat that would like to come up at all? I see some familiar faces that normally have quite interesting questions. So if anyone does want to bob up, make that happen. Yeah, cool. So while people are deciding if they would like to ask you something, what's next for you, Marco? Your book's out. You're a busy guy, but what's next for you? What's in your pipeline? What's the future holding?
So right now I am finishing my 6 months course on the Thoth Tarot, where I didn't teach the tarot, but I teach the magic behind the Thoth Tarot. So it's been a long journey. We went through the major arcana and doing path working for each one, and it's been very, very interesting. We're gonna finish by in a month from now, more or less. We have only like the last 6 cards left. And I'm also doing the second and final live cohort of my Magic Without Tears course, which is pretty much the course that inspired the book. So I'm pretty much like, if you read the book, I am I'm teaching it week by week, like step by step. Ask, people do the rituals, come back, tell me what happened, and I tell you, maybe you should fine tune here and there. I'm writing also. This is a complete. I'm announcing it for the first time here. Uh,
Dun, dun, dun,
ta-da.
dun. Go for it, Marco.
I
Go
am
on, plug
writing
it, my brother.
something. Pretty much, I'm writing a new course that will be announced in July, maybe August, and then we'll run for only 5 weeks, only because usually I always do like 3-4 months and more. And it's going to be on the topic of the Holy Guardian Angel, and I'm going to pretty much like deconstruct a ritual called Liber Samek, week by week.
Oh, wow.
And so possibly giving people tools to understand what should go into your own ritual for contacting the Holy Guardian Angel. And maybe, out of this, a new book will come out. I'm definitely, this first book has been selling very well. I did not expect that. I think we breached 1,000 copies, which, for this word is a lot, right? There's going to be Polish edition, Serbian edition, Macedonian edition, Bulgarian edition of this book. I'm missing one because it's difficult to. Yeah,
Wow.
there's a lot coming up, and so the my publisher already told me like, would you like to write something else? I was like, well, maybe. I really want to have something to say though. I just don't want to write another book because I have the option to do that. I mean, I'm grateful to have the option to do that, but I would like to write something that has my voice in it. And you read the book, you know what it's like. It's very like very
Absolutely.
direct, and possibly like the theme of the Holy Guardian Angel. It's and True Will as well. It's such an important one, and if I'm gonna be able to, I don't want to demystify it because this is a topic that should remain, that should have an area of mystique around it. But maybe clarify some points. What is it really, and what do you need to do to get there? Yeah, that's what I'm brewing. Oh, music! I'm gonna do some more music with my. I don't do. I don't tour anymore. I don't really release music anymore. But we found out some old remixes, and I've been like remixing other things. So some music will come out as well.
What kind of music is it?
Have you ever heard of a band called VMV Nation? Maybe no, maybe no. That's the big.
No.
Imagine it's like Depeche Mode meets The Prodigy. So it's synth pop, but
Yeah.
with a heavy beat. Now, BNB Nation, it was not my band, but it's the biggest band that I played for. My band is called XP8, and for many years, I was also a member of another band, a German band called Faderhead. We, like we were kind of big. Like we had like we still have like millions of listeners on Spotify and things like that. But it's
Wow.
something that I walked away from in 2016. I did my last gig with Faderhead in 2018, and then there was supposed to do more, but the pandemic happened, and then I was like, I'm too old for that. Right? I spent 10 years on a tour bus and drinking a bottle of vodka per day. I think that would kill me.
Wowzers.
Exactly.
Wowzers. We've got a couple of questions in the house. P, I'm just going to go to Matthew. Matt?
Hi,
Matthew?
Marco.
How are
Oh,
you?
thanks. Oh, I'm doing good. Thank you. Thank you, Astral. Thank you, Priscilla. Thank you, Marco.
Hi.
Marco, since you've done a lot of, I guess, you've been in those types of societies, and you've probably seen and heard more than most of us will ever know. Is there any like safeguards or red flags you would give the audience to who are starting to go into this type of subject
Mm-hmm.
and don't really know what to look for, watch out for?
Well, yes, I would say that first and foremost, I would avoid immediately like run away as soon as you find a group where there's a leader that has the absolute control of everything. Like if you find yourself in a group where the leader is seen as the prophet, as the master, as the absolute truth, leave it. Nothing good is ever going to come out of that, right? I would say that if you find yourself in a group where you are forced to go through things that you're not comfortable with, leave it, right? Like if you find yourself in a group where say, well, like in order to do this initiation, you really have to sleep with the initiator, leave it. There's not You don't need to do that, right? There's no truth in that. There's an element whereby I also seen that in recent years, to counterpoint these issues, which are unfortunately very common issues, uh, we over sanitized the experience of formal initiation. But I'm pretty sure that, I mean, I can tell you there's ways of doing it where you get full consent of the person, and you never should put someone in state of incredible emotional distress, which I've seen happening, and that should never happen. Absolutely. So like I said, if I would say these are the biggest red flags. If you find yourself in a cult of personality whereby the leader is the absolute truth, leave it, run it. They don't have anything to offer. I'm gonna be something very honest. Well, I'm gonna be controversial here, as I'm always like. There's a lot of these things. You see, Teal's one, right? Like to name a big name out there. I would not go a million miles near that person. That is literally. I've seen many people like her, and that's bad, right? There's nothing good can come from these people because the price you pay, it's way too high. And yeah, I mean, like count also it follows that if you find yourself in a place where they say, hey, in order to do this you really have to do X, where X is something that makes you feel completely uncomfortable, it means that that's not for you. You're not for you. They're not for you. There's many other options, or like I said many times, you don't need any groups. They don't have anything to offer to you. There's no secrets. It's all about you deciding to initiate yourself through tried and tested methods, and eventually get to the point where the holier than angel, the holy diamond, the algoides, the high intelligence will teach you directly.
Thank thank you so much.
Of course.
Okay, Priscilla?
Mine is more just a thank you before I know we get to Nora's question. Thank you so much, Marco. It's been an honor to be able to be in a space with you again. I always feel so motivated when I come to Holly's and astral spaces also. So just a thank you. You are a light in the community, and what you're saying is absolutely true. Like, we all have the right to this, and you're your own most important magical tool. So thank you for all these reminders.
Thank you.
That's it. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you very much. And once again, thank you for inviting me to your podcast, which, by the way, everybody should go and listen. We had a lot of a lot of fun on that one. So thank you so much. Okay.
Nora, what's up?
Hi, thanks so much for letting me up here. Marco, thank you so much for taking time to do this Twitter space. And, I didn't realize that you were in V&V Nation. I actually saw your band probably in the mid-2000s, like 2006 or 2007 era. So I could definitely vouch for everyone listening that Marco makes good music.
It's funny because
but what I wanted...
that was exactly the years that I was touring with them. So if you see the Judgment tour, you saw me 100%.
That's awesome. I'm sure I have an ex-boyfriend out there who's really jealous that I'm talking to you right now, which is awesome. But I wanted to ask you, since this has been a topic recently in ufology, people have been bringing up Italian UFO era of like the 1930s. So in your experience and research, have you found anything interesting or related to that subject?
So it's interesting you mentioned that, because in the Italian UFO community, which, as I told you before, right, like I kind of never got enmeshed with it because I went the magic way, but that was something that I was researching and studying and being interested in the 90s as a teenager. We always knew that the Mussolini government allegedly found something. It's nothing new really. Like, it's something that when recently I saw this these new articles, I was like, yeah, like is that news? Like everybody in the woo-woo or paranormal community in Italy knows that, and of course, it's tied with the idea of the fact that the Axis had a lot of connections with the other. Unfortunately, they were the bad guys, obviously, but it's nothing new. Like, yes, we know that, right? Well, it's something that we've been. I mean, I remember reading about it in articles on various, paranormal magazines in the '90s. Another thing that's going to be interesting for me is that at the same time, as this whistleblower thing is happening right now, and pretty much like all the interest in ufology in the last few years, I always go back to Italian media, and I don't find almost anything at all. Like, it's almost like Italy is not talking about these things, which is strange because we have a lot of I say witnesses, right? Especially if you go on the Adriatic Sea near Pescara in the region of Abruzzo. There is, like, pretty much if you go there during the summer, you're gonna see things in the sky all the time. My partner, she used to live in Umbria, which is in the middle. It's in one of the landlocked regions of Italy, and she and her mom did see a huge shape in the sky. Was like 10 years ago or something, and it was something that they showed us. Well, I mean, people here see these things all the time, so it's so strange that I forgot to tell you something. I mean, I saw something in the sky as well. Summer of 1998. Yeah, this was, yeah, definitely summer of 1998. I think I saw what I think I saw. It was more like a meteor, but it was some. It was I was coming back home. It was like 3 a.m. in the morning. I was driving on this very long road that ties Rome, where I was born and living, to where I was living, which is nearby Ostia, nearby the sea. So imagine, like, it's dead of night, and there's like night sky, and I have it's summer, so I have all the windows down, and I start hearing something, a strange whoosh sound. And I was thinking, oh my god, I have a tire down, or I have to do something. My car is dying. Shit, it's night. What am I gonna do? So I just look out, and I see this strange spherical shape, which was, I'm remembering, like, I'm seeing it right now because it was the only time I saw something like this. It was basically blue on the front, and it has a long tie that was like greenish, and it like literally went from one side to the other side of the sky in 10 seconds. So it must have been fast. Okay, what it was, I don't know. Was I mean, at the time, I didn't receive my first initiation yet, so yeah, I mean, I was doing magic, but I was not proficient in it, so I didn't think about contacting it. I was actually also in awe. I was like, okay, this is fantastic. Like, I was not scared at all. I was like, oh my god, this is fucking amazing. But it just disappeared. In hindsight, I think it was more of just a meteor or something like that. And the next day, in the paper, there was reporting of this. Like, a lot of people saw the same thing, which is interesting to me because right now nobody in Italy is speaking about these things. It's very, very rare. You only see the classic, ultra conspiracy theorists on YouTube, but apart from that, not really. Which is strange because it used to be something was very much discussed in Italy because of the past, dating back to the strange machines that allegedly the Mussolini government had, or all the witnesses that every summer you come from the Adriatic Sea because apparently there's bases there. Uh, so I hope that answered the question.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Nora. I think we probably going to wrap up shortly. Lizard, did you have our last question?
Yeah, I just want to say Manchester City won the Champions League, and I'm super excited. But I'd also like to say that.
Oh, I'm Scouse. I can't deal with that, mate.
No,
Don't ruin my life. What you on
I know.
about?
So I do apologise, but Ollie, you're so beautiful, and I really enjoyed your interview the other day. I may be a
Thank
little
you.
bit.
You've redeemed yourself. You've redeemed yourself.
I may be a little drunk, but I do apologise, and I wish everybody on
right.
UFO Twitter a wonderful time. And you know that disclosure is coming. And I just want to shout out to my boy Tupa, because I love you, the way you speak and the way you communicate is just so amazing. And when disclosure comes, we're all going to get in the channel and we're just going to get drunk, and it's going to be amazing.
Lizzie, do you have a question for Marco?
Or
are you just happy
I'm just
reveling in this Man City win?
I'm just reveling in this Man City win. And
right, well, you go back to reveling. Chrissy, have you got a... Thanks, bud.
No
Chrissy,
problem.
have you got a question?
Well, actually, I think Matt actually asked the question for me, but thank you.
Well,
my pleasure.
Thank you.
My
Thank you all.
Well, guys, we're going to wrap up. Astral, I believe there's another space on tomorrow.
Yeah, a couple spaces tomorrow with Total Disclosure on, and tomorrow afternoon, I think around 2 or 3. And then we're having another space with Daniel Jones after the big Daniel Grosh interview with Russ Colhart at 9. But thanks to Marco for coming in. It's been a great discussion. I've enjoyed the whole thing. It's been awesome.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure for me as well. And yes, I'm definitely looking forward to tomorrow's spaces. And yeah, the big interview. Like maybe we'll know more.
Indeed, tomorrow is going to be a really interesting day. I think there'll be many of us in the UK switching our VPNs to the States and signing up for free trials of things so we can watch it. But on behalf of me, thank you so much, Astral, for UFO Twitter Week. Priscilla, you beauty. It's so nice to connect with you. Marco, oh my gosh, I'm absolutely going to terror you with questions. So unfortunately, you're not going to get rid of me now.
But please, all the
but
questions are welcome. Thank you very much.
They're coming, and I'd be really interested to know more about your course that's starting soon. Thank you to everybody that's tuned in. Thank you for everybody that's asked a question, and hopefully we've peeled back a little bit more of a side of this topic that we don't always talk about. So that was important to me, and the spaces that I put together, it's important to maybe we all learn something and we all walk away a bit refreshed and knowing something a bit more, because we're all walking each other home after all. So it's a good night for me. It's nearly 1 o'clock here in the UK. So before I turn into a pumpkin, have a great evening, everybody. Lots of love. Take care, and we'll speak soon.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye.